I'm Oral Hershiser, and I am on Blue Review. Hey, this is Sean Green. You're watching the Blue Review.
Bum, bum, ba-da-dum, bum, bum. Ring. I got to keep the tradition going. While Greg is on vacation, welcome everybody to the Thursday edition of the Blue Review presented by LAX. I am Marcas Grant, Greg Bergman, still in parts unknown. Wherever you are, Greg, relax, take your time, enjoy yourself, and we will see you back on the other side. But plenty to talk about today. The Dodgers finish off a sweep of the Colorado Rockies in Denver. We'll have our pal Bruce Kuntz on in just a second to help us through that one, and maybe a little bit of something else too, because we always have Bruce on to talk prospects. So maybe get a little bit of a report on what's going on down on the farm there for the Dodgers. But first, as always, want to let you know that the Blue Review is powered by LAX. The LAX Skylink train is currently in testing, preparing to provide a direct, fast, and free connection to the new rental car center, the airport terminals, and the LA Metro. For more information, visit lawa.org/ESPN. All right, let's bring in the one and only Bruce Kuntz, our pal, who is actually live from Denver. Who's been watching this? You got to see all three of these games in person. Bruce, one, welcome. Appreciate you getting up. It's a little bit not as early there. It's what 7:30 in the morning in Denver. So appreciate you getting up with us. And yeah, man, how are things?
Things are good. It was a good series this week in Denver, so yeah, everything's good there. Like you said, it's nice that it's been all the way right outside for me to get ready for this episode for a change. So that's been nice, and I'm happy to be back. So thanks for having me on.
Of course. Well, I mean, first, I guess big picture because you were there. Mostly just kind of a fun trip. Nothing professional, just kind of personal business. But you got to watch the three games there at Coors Field. I know it's the Rockies. I understand that. I understand who they are. But considering how this team has gone for the last month plus, your thoughts on them just getting a sweep and really just handling business against a bad team.
Yeah, this was a return to the Dodgers finally feeling like they were playing Dodger baseball, not at every single point in this series, but through a lot of it, especially think about game one. Blake Snell looked really good. They jumped out early. There were crooked numbers throughout this week that they were throwing up and hitting the ball out of the ballpark that you haven't seen that sort of consistency very much. Ohtani had a couple homers on Monday. Muncy hit his home run on Monday that is as annihilated as I've ever seen in baseball in person. That one was crazy. And yeah, the starting pitching looked good throughout the weekend. I think yesterday's game, obviously the bullpen was a little bit shaky, and you would have liked to see the offense add a little more as the game went on. But those are things you can get over and just be happy that any road series that you come away with 3 wins is always a good thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think if you look at it sort of big picture, yeah, it's 3 wins. Yes, it's against the Rockies, but it's 2 sweeps in their last couple of series. There was the sort of frustration of the Brewers series thrown in between, but they have won 7 of their last 10. If we're going to kind of look at the positives and kind of expand this over a period, it's been more wins than losses recently. At the same time, they've also not only regained ground in the division. They've also put a little bit of space between themselves and the Braves for that number 2 seed. When you look at that, for instance, kind of get away from the Rockies for a second and look at this sort of big picture. How important for you is it that they get one of the top 2 seeds and be able to just have that first round off?
It's huge. I think that is instrumental down the stretch. Even more important than competing for the 1 seed with the Brewers, making sure that they have one of the top 2 is huge. Obviously, they had to play in the wild card series against the Reds last year, and they stomped right through it without any kind of issue. But there's just no guarantee that that's going to happen. I've always said that I don't even like the division series being a best of 5 because it already just feels like that's not enough of a sample size for baseball's randomness to truly play out. And a best of 3 series, I think that you could look at, in the regular season, the Dodgers lose series to random teams all the time. And that's not an indication that that other team is better than the Dodgers, but it's just the way the baseball goes. So avoiding that wild card series is absolutely paramount down the stretch, even though the Dodgers would definitely be favored, expected to win it, all that if they wind up in it. You just don't want to put yourself in that situation.
No, absolutely. And I think it's, you talk about the randomness. I mean, a 3-game series, even if you're going to get all of them at home, all it takes is just one bad game, one bad inning, really, and suddenly you're down 0-1 and your back is against the wall, because then you absolutely need to win the next two in order to advance. And look, even with the starting rotation that the Dodgers have, as you mentioned, weird things happen in baseball all the time. So it's the more you can avoid sort of that randomness, I think the better off that you're going to be. Looking at what happened, of course, over the last 3 days, I thought one of the big positives, one of the big takeaways was Kyle Tucker just kind of coming to life. A couple of nights ago, he had the big RBI double, which broke the 0 for 26 streak. Last night, a couple of hits as well. The story for him this year has been how much better he has been on the road than he has been at home, especially offensively. But I really felt like, Bruce, after Monday night with the 0 for 5, with the dropped pop-up, that was kind of rock bottom for him. So I don't know how you feel about it, but I just think anything positive coming from Kyle Tucker is very much a sigh of relief for me, and just feels like a chance to maybe finally jumpstart what's been an awful season for him.
He really needed to have a turnaround these last 2 games of the series. And I think that was, you can give some props to Dave Roberts for keeping him in the lineup. I think there's a lot of managers that after that drop fly ball on Monday, the 0 for 5, and would have said, at least get a game to refresh yourself. But Dave just penciled him right back in, and he had that RBI double on Tuesday to kind of break the slump. I still think that there are things that he's working through mechanically, and he didn't look dominant by any stretch through the rest of the series, but just adding some numbers, tallying some sort of way to help the ball club is something that, makes all those voices die down a lot. And it's, the chatter has really turned up around him. That's a tough thing to play with. Obviously the 60 million salary thing hanging over his head, the expectation of everybody in the fan base, that's a lot of tough stuff to deal with. And I think watching Tucker throughout the season, if there's one thing you can identify, it's not that he doesn't care, and it's not that he isn't trying or working behind the scenes. It's just been a rough year. So you hope that these 2 games maybe helped him find some kind of rhythm again, and he can return home. It's been very weird. The home away splits are as polarizing as anything I've ever seen for a player that's this talented. So if he can start to figure out how to hit at Dodger Stadium again before the end of the year and before the playoffs, that would be nice.
Yeah, I can't make heads or tails of that. And we've talked to a lot of people and asked their thoughts, and I think we're all coming to the same conclusion. It's just weird. It doesn't make any sense why he could be so good on the road and so bad offensively at Dodger Stadium. I just don't know. But I feel like I've also sort of seen in the last few days the feelings toward him from the fan base sort of change. I mean, it went from, I think people were just frustrated and angry in that end of the Brewers series where he heard the boos after missing a fly ball, to, I think, after that first game of the Rockies series, people just legitimately felt bad. I mean, just felt sympathy, because you saw him really going through it in the field, on the dugout. And I've gotten the sense that the fan base may be starting to rally around him a little bit. So we'll see what happens when they get back home. But it was just nice to see him have some success in whatever form over the last couple of days. Roki Sasaki continuing to pitch well. And we saw him last night kind of battle through some things a little bit, but again, keep the Dodgers in the ball game. In fact, the 2 runs he gave up probably weren't really his fault. I think a fly ball to left field, it probably goes as a sac fly, Bruce. So probably one of those 2 runs does come in, but definitely not both of them probably should score. But your feelings on what we've seen from Roki Sasaki, who in the second half of the season has been a much different guy than the one who was getting pulled out of spring training games back in February and March.
Yeah, he's been pretty interesting to analyze throughout the year because he's evolved so many times already in the pitcher that he is. And a lot of it is just tied to whether he's commanding his stuff, especially the fastball, and what kind of life he has behind the fastball. Early in the year, it was that dead zone 96 that he was throwing last year that just is not going to get the job done. In the middle part of the season now, he's sort of found that fastball, a little bit more life behind it, and then a little bit more velocity. And that's obviously really important for him. His whole thing is just setting up that splitter. The slider's also been good, but he needs to get to the splitter. That's where you see the really ugly swings. That pitch is good enough. He can throw it against righties, lefties, doesn't matter. And as long as he can command the fastball in the zone, get ahead in counts, then that's where the success comes. And I'll say for this Colorado Rockies lineup, obviously they're not the best team in baseball, but that offense is not bad, especially when you're playing at Coors Field. I was impressed with a lot of those guys that took good at bats throughout the week. But the Dodgers starters were battling. Roki was like that too. There were a lot of deep counts yesterday. Rockies working good at bats, but he didn't give in. Like you said, the only 2 runs that he gave up were a pretty bad misplay in left field from Teoscar Hernandez that could have kept that inning a little bit more contained. So I thought he looked solid, and you'd always worry about a guy like Roki going to the elevation and if the fastball would be affected by the thinner air and everything, but he looked perfectly fine yesterday.
Yeah, and I've been really impressed. You talk about the fastball, and that's kind of been the key for him, right? If he can land that thing for strikes, then the splitter does become a lot more devastating because now you have to respect it. You have to you be able to chase, and especially with an aggressive team like the Rockies, who they don't mess around up there. They are going up there and they're getting their hacks in, and they're putting the ball in play. I mean, I sort of like how they've built this team. I don't know what it means in the long term, but understanding they've got a big outfield where the ball travels, but if it doesn't go deep, then it falls in. And it just seemed like so many of those balls that were hit kind of even toward the gap, not even all the way to the wall, just end up as doubles. They've built a really interesting ball club there. So kind of curious to watch them develop over the next couple of years. We'll see sort of how things go. The guy yesterday who did a whole lot of damage was Mickey Moniak, including what was the game-tying home run. You talk about the bullpen and its hiccups. The one guy who really has been solid has been Tanner Scott for most of the year, but especially the last few days. It brings up sort of an interesting question, at least for me. Edwin Diaz on the IL right now with neck inflammation. We'll sort of monitor that and when he's available again. But when he comes back, Bruce, do you think he immediately goes back into that 9th inning, or is there a conversation about him maybe being, in the short term, the guy who gets the ball to the 9th inning?
Yeah, I think that it would have to be at least a conversation. And I think that depending on how long Diaz is out, if he comes back, even if it's just the minimum stay on the IL, I think he's going to have to prove that he can pitch in a high leverage spot again, because it was ugly enough through this stint since he got back, including this last outing on Monday in Colorado where the fastball was way down and he's looked like he was just throwing batting practice the way the guys were catching up to it. So I don't think that there's any logical way that he can come back and the Dodgers can throw him right back into high leverage. I understand that, Dave Roberts is that kind of a manager, wanting to stick by his guys, show that he has the confidence in them. All that kind of stuff is good, but we talked about this after the blown save against the Brewers, that the longer you keep throwing him into those high leverage spots when he does not have his best stuff and clearly is not capable in the current moment of getting those big outs, the more skeletons you're creating, the tougher it's going to be to overcome all those mental hurdles of all of a sudden being this guy who's been a shutdown closer his entire career, come to a new destination, all of a sudden struggle this bad. So I think that they're going to have to find a way to ease him back in, not giving up on Diaz contributing in the postseason by any stretch, but there's work to do to get there. And I think that Tanner Scott has clearly established himself as the best reliever on this ball club. I have completely forgotten about anything he struggled with last year because he's the guy in this bullpen. He's looked really good throughout the year, and that's carried all the way over into now. So Tanner Scott is the number one reliever on the depth chart, and I don't think that's going to change in the immediate future.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because I think there are parallels between Edwin Diaz and Tanner Scott in the sense that, Scott was the guy that they brought over last year with the intent of giving him those 9th innings, and he struggled incredibly with those to the point that, we saw saw Yamamoto closing out Game 7 of the World Series because you just weren't confident that Tanner Scott was going to be that guy, in the postseason. So Diaz, I think, sort of working through a similar situation right now, and obviously, when he's back, you are correct. He's going to get opportunities. It's just a question of how high up the trust tree he is for Dave Roberts, and whether he's going to get those high leverage ninth innings. Because to your point, Monday was frustrating to the point that they had to have Scott even just get up to warm up before Diaz was able to close that thing out. I did see in the chat, and it's a good question. What is up with Alex Vesia? He was sort of living as a guy who. He's not a high velocity guy, Bruce, but he was somehow living in the first half. Is it just a case of it's finally caught up to him, or is this just a bad patch?
Yeah, I think the struggle for him this year has been a lack of strikes, and that hasn't been something that's been a huge issue for him in the past, but all of a sudden he's been walking a lot of guys, and in the early part of the season it was not as noticeable because he at least wasn't giving up damage, so even when he was putting guys on base, he was usually getting out of it. Now, in this last month, all of a sudden there's been damage on top of it, so you can't combine free passes with in-zone fastballs that are all of a sudden now getting hit. So he's definitely going through it. I thought last night, coming out, getting 2 outs, and then a 4-pitch walk with 2 outs and nobody on to set up that game-tying home run is a pretty frustrating way for that to go, and not the battle that I think all of us are used to seeing out of him. So I think he's also a guy that the Dodgers are going to hope over this next month can get himself right and be in his normal spot, because he's a guy that they want to trust in the postseason. But this last month has definitely shaken the confidence a little bit. And I think that the remaining part after Tanner Scott on that bullpen depth chart is definitely up in the air. There's guys like Vesia, Edgardo Enriquez, Jack Dreyer, that Brock Stewart, I think, is in that group too, that are all kind of up in the air of who's going to be the most trustworthy heading into the playoffs. And it could go a number of ways over this next month.
One thing that should help the bullpen, presumably, is getting more length and getting more depth in the starting rotation. Not that they've been bad, but now you have Tyler Glasnow, who just had his, looks like his final rehab start, had 9 strikeouts, looked really good in that one. So he's expected to rejoin the ball club early next week. The rotation is starting to look, Bruce, like we thought it would at the beginning of the year. I mean, we didn't necessarily think Tarek Skubal was going to be there, but with Skubal, Yamamoto, Snell, Glasnow, the fact that Sasaki has pitched well enough, the fact that against all odds, Eric Lauer has been a guy who takes the ball every 6th day, gives you a chance to win. And now you got Shohei starting to get some work as well. Could this just be a thing where, like in some postseasons, they just lean on this rotation to try to get you through 6, maybe 7 innings, and then they cobble together something in the last part with the bullpen?
Yeah, I think that definitely has to be the plan. And for the Dodgers, I think what they're hoping is, you think 2024 was the World Series run where the starting rotation was just gutted, injuries, underperformance. They did not have a starting rotation to lean on there, lean heavily on the bullpen. Last year, it was a complete flip where the starting rotation was awesome. The bullpen was pretty shaky. I think they're hoping they can go into the playoffs this year with both sides as strong as they can be. But I think there's no question it's the starting rotation that is the strength of this pitching staff, and the Dodgers are going to want to lean on that strength as much as they can. They've got so many guys in this rotation, the Yamamotos, the Snells, the Skubals, Glasnow, like all these guys are the level of pitchers that you're not worried as much about the stuff like third time through the order, and because these guys are just good arms, they get outs, and so Dave Roberts can lean on them to go deeper in games and all those things a lot more. And then you also think about the cascading effect that adding a Glasnow back, if they have those top 4 guys all healthy heading into the playoffs, then you have the potential to shift a guy like Roki Sasaki down to the bullpen and hope that fastball that started to play up in the second half gets even better down there, and he can be a weapon like he was last year. I also think it's funny that we're a couple, just about a month out from the All-Star game where Justin Robleski was fantastic heading in. Obviously, he struggled after, but he's on the injured list now, and we're barely even having to think about that. So that speaks to the depth of this pitching staff and how much talent they really have. To lose a guy who was an All-Star a month ago, went through some struggles, yeah, but every other team in baseball would be really stressing that, and the Dodgers don't necessarily have to.
No, yeah, I mean, I think the fact that they got that much out of Robleski for that long was sort of a bonus. I mean, I think they were hoping for good things, but the fact that he carried it as long as he did was kind of a bonus. And then you throw in again Eric Lauer, who was a cast off in Toronto and has been really good since coming to the Dodgers. I think those are all the things. I know people get upset about them getting these Scoobles and being able to sign, Blake Snell and those guys, but I think it's on the margins where you get performances out of Robleski, where you get Lauers, where even you're able to cobble something together with a guy like Emmett Sheehan for a while and just kind of get through. I think those are the things where the Dodgers really excel and help them win ball games. Can't have you on without talking some prospects. I know you've got your mid-season prospect report coming out over at Dodgers Digest as we reboot this thing for the back half of the season. Who is the top prospect in the Dodger organization, and why is his name Josue DePaula? I'm just guessing.
Yeah, Josue has definitely established himself as number one. He's the only guy that I've got with a 60 future value at the top of the list. And that isn't disrespectful to the guys below him, but Josue has just been ridiculous this year in Double-A. There isn't a flaw in his offensive game. For a guy who's 21 years old, he's walked pretty much just as much as he's struck out. He's hitting for power, all the things that you wanted to see this year development-wise of lifting more fly balls to the pull side. Everything is there. The approach is already big league quality. And I think in a lot of other organizations, he would have been called up at some point. It doesn't mean that the Dodgers are wrong for not doing that, but that's kind of just the way that they operate in some careful development and all that. But he's supremely talented and a guy to be super excited about. I think that there aren't 5 other prospects in baseball that I would say are more valuable than DePaula right now.
Obviously, you're part of the Scooble deal was moving Zaire Hope. And I know he has not had the best go of it since he's gone over to the Tigers organization so far. But they haven't really skipped the beat. I mean, not offensively, but outfield wise, they're still deep. I mean, how many outfielders are you going through in your top, say 10 or 15 when it comes to Dodger prospects right now?
Yeah, the top 3 are all outfielders, and beyond that, there's plenty more to be found. So I think it's pretty remarkable that package that the Dodgers gave to Detroit was not small. It was the biggest package for any rental in Major League history, regardless of all the noise of people expecting it to be more. That was not a small package. And yet the Dodger farm system really did not feel it at all. You lost 2 guys that are both top 100 prospects in Zaire Hope and River Ryan. Brady Smith, also a really good third piece in a deal who's trending up this year. And it's totally fine in the Dodger farm system. They still got ranked number 1 by MLB Pipeline just the other day as the best farm in baseball. They've got as much blue chip talent as anybody else, if not more. And then the depth in the farm system is always the place that they really thrive. And that's super strong too. I think I've got 40 prospects in the system, all graded at least a 40 future value, which is just ridiculous kind of depth that other organizations don't have. So there isn't a weakness really in terms of the farm system. It is still a huge strength, and the Dodgers are going to have more guys coming through the pipeline that either can break through into the big leagues, can be more trade pieces in the next couple of off seasons and trade deadlines. There's so much talent in the organization that is how the Dodgers build this machine. Not necessarily the money helps, but having that kind of a constant farm that is just bringing more talent through to either be traded, or the Robleskis, like we just talked about, the guys that are filling in the gaps on the big league roster in a really good way. Andy Pages has been one of the most valuable guys on the team this year. It's a great machine that is still well oiled.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, they've done a great job. And traditionally, the Dodgers have been really good at continuing to build their farm system, and that has not changed with Andrew Friedman running the show at the top for the Dodgers, for sure. Go check it out at Dodgers Digest. When is it? When does that drop, Bruce?
6 minutes right after this ends.
All right. So go check it out over Dodgers Digest, the midseason prospect report. Bruce, as always, we appreciate it. Safe travels, and we'll talk to you again soon.
Appreciate it. Thanks for having me on, Marcus.
All right. Stick around. The Sedano and Cap Morning Extravaganza coming up right after us. Thanks to everybody in the chat. Thanks to Carlo for production assistance. But that'll do it for this edition of the Blue Review presented by LAX. For Bruce, I'm Marcus. We'll talk to you tomorrow, 6:30 to 6:55 here on the ESPN LA YouTube channel. See you.